Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I am Maddie K. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to episode 193. And this episode, it's okay if you feel a little lost, if you got turned around, if you're not sure where that next little thing was supposed to be, because we can show you the way. Because there's maps. There's been maps in video games for a long time, in print, in-game, elsewhere, and by God, we love them. I mean, I love them, and I'm speaking for us right now, so there we are. And to help us discuss maps and games in their place, we are joined by the owner and founder of Retro Game Books, Brian Riggsbee. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've been wanting to do this episode for a while. I think we connected on Twitter back before it became a flaming pile of poop. But you've been making these map books. You did the NES, and I had the privilege of being a part of the SNES map book. Now I can say I'm a published writer thanks to you. So also, I was on the website today. I didn't realize that one of the sample pages is my page. It made me very happy. I wanted to talk a little bit about, before we get into why maps play such a huge role in video games, talk about like where Retro Game Books came from, what made you want to start pursuing this, and what about maps specifically. Why did you want to print books and do writing and have people discuss the importance of these things?
So I used to be a game developer. I did some production, game design, that kind of stuff. Worked on some tween games, so nothing to really be maybe as proud about as other people might be about their games, but you don't get to pick them all the time. What I'm getting at is like, I used to do those things and I felt like I needed that itch to scratch still as far as like producing something gaming related. And, the pandemic was just coming around. At that time, my wife was pregnant with our first and only child. And I was thinking, oh, wow, like if I'm going to try something new, I feel like it's now. And I just decided I would challenge myself. I would write a book. I would do all the research. I would pick something niche. That was the History of Rygar book. I thought, oh, it would probably be like a 30-page pamphlet. And then all the scope creep came in and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and got deeper into the research. I started learning things I didn't even know about. Connected with an editor, connected with a cover artist, figured out the production process and everything. And that's when it all became pretty addictive for me. I figured, well, I can do this, but like, I want to get my design chops. I want to work more in design. I want to work more in writing. I want to work more with artists. Honestly, the thing that I think is most fun about these things is just like contracting, working with artists and putting custom brand new art together based on things we know and love, or maybe something totally new. And it was actually really challenging to get that to all come together and feel proud about how it came together. You asked about the map books. I mean, for me, it was like I grew up just like a lot of us, right? With older games that sometimes came with a fold-out map, maybe had an in-game map, not as much, but maybe there was the magazine art with the maps and the walkthroughs and those kind of things. It all came together in some kind of way, and the map added a layer to the games that maybe the more primitive art style could not convey by itself. And so I just thought like, I don't see anything like this out there right now. Like there's a lot of like coffee table style books. There's some books written about popular IPs, like Boss Fight Books has excellent books on like those topics,
Oh,
for
yeah,
example.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so I want to make sure whatever we put out, it's something unique. So with the map series, it just felt like a good connection to the things I love, and started with NES. Now there's Genesis. Now there's a 3-volume SNES series that you mentioned. The 3rd volume will be coming out either late this year or early next year. Just pulling all that amazing content, new content, fan art content, really dissecting it, like getting deep into the Japanese style of the art, not just the Western style, and comparing it together. Like, I just love seeing it all together. That's kind of the brief history of how it came together. It's been going on for 5 years now working with other writers more talented than myself. Got a couple of books in the hopper right now. They're both being edited. Other projects that are being spun up. I'm revamping an old project I designed a long time ago. It's all happening at the same time.
Well, that's the way it goes. Once you start a project, it's never fewer projects than that forever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm honored to be part of it. I was really proud of what I wrote so in Volume 2, I wrote about A Link to the Past, which is one of my favorite Zelda games. And then I got to write, which will be in Volume 3, about Super Mario RPG, probably one of my favorite RPGs of all time. And you and I have collaborated on some future stuff, too, that will come soon. As someone who's been writing for a long time, but only writing about video games recently, there's something about focusing on a very specific topic, which is why I think Geoff and our conversations are so enlightening and fun on this podcast. Really focusing on a very specific thing, I think, really enables creativity because then you really get to dig deep into that thing. And it sounds like creating these map books, that's a big part of it, right? You get to collaborate with writers because what I wrote about A Link to the Past was not the same as someone else wrote about A Link to the Past. And I love that too, is like, you probably don't even get a lot of the same stories because it's a little different for everybody.
No, that's exactly right. Like some people maybe talk about the general mood of the game, the level design, the flow of it, maybe the artistic style of the map itself, maybe the more technical details of it, which is interesting. Some people talk more about like how the game made them feel or like how it inspired them moving into whatever it is they did in life or how it makes them think about games today versus games then. Yeah, it is really cool to see those all together. And that Link to the Past spread, it's 30 pages. It's the beastie, chunky thing inside the book. So it's got a lot of quotes in there. And I wasn't doing that with the earlier maps books. And I just think it's just fun to have the community at large involved in some way. Because there's people like yourself, there's a few like comedians in there, there's some former game developers I used to work with, and some I didn't know that I just talked to, some writers and journalists, and they all have good opinions about these things.
Well, and also to kind of what you were saying about getting started on your first project, The History of Rygar, which was an NES game that I grew up with that I never finished as a kid. And I think nowadays I could go back and really, by the grace of being an adult and having the internet at my fingertips, I can finish it, damn it. Probably some save states. But you have those personal experiences and you have those aspects of, well, I know this part, or I know this thing, or I know how this connects. Your research into it sounds like you unearthed a lot about the way it connected probably to the arcade version as well as to what became the NES, to where that went, possibly even all the way to its PS2 iteration. All of the facts and pieces that none of us as consumers, as gamers, and certainly in those sorts of days where there felt like such a divide between East and West, or even, us and the kid next door and how we experience the game. But so many of us, certainly the NES, SNES, Sega Genesis, that late 80s, early 90s era of games, and a little before and a little after, I think the subjective is so important to it because we constructed the worlds to fill in the gaps. And that was, we didn't get a properly localized manual, or the map was incomplete, or simply you can have beautiful concept art of how the game is supposed to look, how the characters are supposed to look. But you've got a 16 color palette right now, and you've got to make that happen. So the developers were making gaps that the rest of us were filling. So I think having both sides of that is crucial.
Yeah, some of those gaps, at least for me, were filled with a lot of 80s sci-fi and fantasy movies, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's so many good ones, and the look, the feel, the castle's floating in the sky, and the hero who's got this whimsical weapon, this weapon that doesn't feel like it should even exist in reality, right? And like
Yeah.
these creatures that just don't make any sense. You pull from those things to fill in the gap. You use your imagination to fill in the gap.
And you get that kind of like flat circle thing as well, as far as like either localization time or when you get the game. When you're 7 years old, when you experience something, it's the first time it happened, no matter what anyone else tells you. But yeah, you see castles in the sky, you see strange flying ships, and you got to wonder who cribbed who, and in the end, who cares? But finding those connections and how people found them is remarkable.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, you mentioned the different games. Yeah, the book goes into all that. Like, I didn't even realize there were some of the releases that had occurred back in the day because my experience was the arcade game we had in our local pizza place or burger place.
Yeah.
We had the NES game. My neighbor and I played it to death. We actually managed to beat it. Back then, we thought it was like one of the hardest things ever. I replayed it on my Switch and I was like, this is so easy. But wait, I also just spent like 3 months researching it. So I know like literally how everything connects and what order to get every item in and all that silliness.
Yeah, it's like those old cast iron puzzles where it's like get the ring off the horseshoe. It's the hardest thing until you know the solution. Then it's like, oh, I'm done in 3 seconds. That's easy. It's once you know the answers, you can just. It's an IKEA cabinet you're building. But yeah, didn't they had like an Atari Lynx version? There was like it went everywhere.
Yeah, I have a whole shelf. It's the one thing where I like have everything except for I don't have the stand-up arcade machine because I mean, it's a stand-up arcade machine. I don't have
Yeah.
space so you're gonna have to drop some money on that and figure out how to fix it up. But yeah, there's quite a few games. Actually, there was even like a fan created Amiga version. He put out like a big box version of it that I picked up and brought home.
Wow.
There's some that are on tape cassette. That's how far back this stuff goes.
Oh, yeah,
There was
yeah.
the PS2 version that you mentioned. There was also a Wii. It's not a remake. It's more of like a remaster of it where they changed the character's name. It's like, if you played PS2, you already played it basically, but a PS2 is essentially where the series died. And I even make the argument at the end of the book, which is like, this could have been God of War or something like it. Like they were starting to kind of like go in that direction. They had already started to explore the Metroidvania like direction, or you insert whatever word you prefer for that type of quote unquote genre. They were doing that in the NES version even back in the day.
Yeah, Kratos has got some disc armor moves going on there. Like,
yeah, he's whipping, he's slashing, he's doing it all.
it's wild. But anyway, that's just one game. There's so many others, and there's so many maps to look at. And certainly of that time, again, that filling in the gaps back and forth. When games came with physical maps, we had our own imagination filling things in. Another game that I always think of that I didn't finish until I was an adult was the original Final Fantasy for NES, which was very much a game that came with all of its information. It had a full list of equipment, of spells, the bestiary, a 64-page instruction manual that walked you through the first portion of the game, and a full world map and several dungeon maps as well. And even still, it was a challenging game. Even though I never made it to the Sky Palace as a child, I would still look at the possibilities, and knowing that I couldn't make it to the upper continents until I got the airship. I never had the airship, but the possibilities of it all.
Yeah. And you remind me of the days like sitting with a friend, and a lot of games were one player back then, and you'd pass the controller back and forth, right? But sometimes you were cartographer on the side, almost like you're like the navigator in some kind of like rally car race or what have you. You're working in tandem. It's actually part of the reason why, we have these notebooks, and sometimes we bundle them, we sell them on the side too, but they're all dot grid because I figure, if you're going to make your own maps, you're going to probably need some grid or grid-like paper. I don't know how many people are still doing that kind of stuff because, especially modern games, they do it all for you, and that's fine. It's a totally different thing. It allows you space to do other things. But, there are still some modern NES games being created out there, and people can always revisit the old classics, and drawing maps I still think is fun.
I mean, that's kind of, honestly, you bring up a good point of, yeah, modern games do it, but also they don't. Because you get plenty of games that have mini maps or that have something going on, so that kind of shows it up there. But something that you can mark up, it's even odds whether or not the game lets you mark up your map the way that you want it to. I'm currently playing through Baldur's Gate 3 on the PS5 with my partner, and the ability to just go, no, I want to go to there, is a little ridiculous in the back and forth of it all. Versus, you don't have a physically printed map. Plenty of games nowadays that are remasters or remakes, they may not have printed maps about them, where you kind of have that bit of a gutter period of like the PS3, where strategy guides were sort of dying out a little bit, but now those games have been remastered. They didn't have mini maps then or whatever else, and they don't have them now. Where do we think that this can live, this can be, and where do we think that's kind of going, I suppose, as far as either a physical map or how well can the notebook map and password book survive in this day and age?
I mean, the first thing I'll say is we need to bring back cloth maps. I know they're expensive, but come on, they look really great.
But physical games nowadays have become basically premier things in deluxe editions. So if I'm going to drop the $80 or whatever else, I'm a physical game collector. If I'm paying for that, yeah, give me the cloth map.
Yeah, I mean, actually, we should probably make some cloth maps too. You actually reminded me of something because you're talking about like that gap period and like the transition. For me, during the PS3 era, I was heavily addicted to Counter-Strike. So I kind of missed out on a lot of PS3 games and had to go back and play them. But recently I played through Expedition 33, which I'm sure a lot of people played through. And of course, that game is well noted as not having a map. Yeah, there's like the world map, but like when you're in the different zones, of which there are many, there is no map. There's no mini map either. And it works for that game. It feels like a conscious decision. Maybe it's a scoping decision, but they implemented it to feel like it made sense. I actually appreciated it because I'm so used to games like RPGs in particular where like I know like, okay, you know how it is. You see a fork in the road. Should I go left or right? I'm always a left first because it's just easier for me to remember if I stick with one. You go a
Nice.
little bit, you're like, oh, this is the way they want me to go. I'm going to go back to the right because that's not the way.
Yeah.
That's where the item's going to go.
Every time.
You can still get that all done. You don't need a mini map, but the mini map just like does too much. It actually kind of can ruin the game. There's usually no like fog of war on it. It's just saying like, there's the dead end. That's probably where the treasure chest is. So I just really appreciated that they actually excluded it. I thought it just made you just focus on the world because also, when you have a minimap, you're just staring at the bottom corner of a screen. It's like when you're watching a movie with subtitles, you don't really get to see everything that's going on. It can kind of hamper the experience a little bit. I say this to say that there are some situations where no map can be a good thing, even though I'm obviously a map advocate.
It's funny that you bring that up. Like that habit. So I'm currently playing a game called Pipistrello and the Cursed Yo-Yo. It's this mix of Metroidvania and top-down Zelda.
It's so fun.
Every time I get into a dungeon, you can see the map. It'll show you where the next 2 rooms on the map would be, but not the whole map. So you have an idea of where the map spreads, but it doesn't reveal everything, which I love. But every time I get to a split path where there's like a north and an east or whatever, I go, all right, which one's the treasure room and which one is progress? Every time I get into a room, if it looks like it's the progress, I go, nope, got to go the other way. I got to get the item first. Because that's just my broken brain. And I did that a lot in Clair Obscura Expedition 33 as well. I would go down a path. I would climb a bunch of stuff, and then I'd go, that looks like a boss. Well, maybe I should go back that way first, or if I hit a flag. Well, I will admit I did get lost a couple times in it. I do like the idea of like foregoing a mini map and just having a large map. I mean, also Geoff and I are giant Metroidvania fans, and so like, or search action games, whatever we're calling them.
Metroidvania.
Those games are required to have a map. Like, I can't imagine having one of those games without a map because that's all it's about. And in fact, Geoff and I recently played Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, which basically doesn't. And so you kind of have to map it out yourself. The modern context of a map versus what a map meant in retro days is not always the same, right? It is guidance, but it's also ease of access. I think about how much I love having a map in the Yakuza games, not because I don't want to get lost, but because I can go, okay, the pink dot is there. That's where the main mission is. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom left because there's at least 3 sub-stories that way. That's kind of my favorite thing about the map that you brought up. It is not my guide to finish the game. It's my guide to delay finishing the game because I want to go off the beaten path and see what else is out there.
That is why it took us so long to finish Infinite Wealth in this house. Sarah loves mini games. But I think, yeah, Brian, to your point, the big difference that I'm hearing here is how interactive or how real-time is the map. I loved DS and 3DS games, certainly the Metroidvanias, playing the Castlevania games, put the minimap on the bottom screen. It wasn't a thing of like showing you a goal. It wasn't moving in real time with you, but it let you know where you were and if you'd been there before. And certainly if you're retreading ground, like, the Streets of Kamurocho in the Like a Dragon games, there is a little bit of, wait, this looks familiar. Was I here before? It's good for checking in on that. But yeah, in RPG, in a linear adventure game, if it's just pointing you towards the next objective, you're just connecting the dots. If you are moving all over a canvas, that's a different story. I've definitely had that experience, Brian, where it's I'm moving, I know where I'm moving, I'm not looking at my character or the world anymore, I'm looking at my little dot on the mini-map and making sure that I'm pointed in the right direction. Whereas having something to check sometimes, having the dot on the overworlds that I can move towards, that's a little different. I'm still maneuvering within the space, not drawing my way through a maze on a diner placemat, which I think is how that feels.
One of the things that ties into what we're all kind of saying here is like games have obviously gotten much more complex over time, even though we see a lot of, 2D, 2.5D, like retro style games, they're still more complicated than it used to be. Like if you look at Animal Well, for example, versus like the original Metroid, there's way more stuff to do and way more places to go. It's like, I didn't have a problem like drawing a map of the original Metroid, or the original Zelda, the original Metal Gear. Like, it's a few squares and rectangles here, connecting some lines. It can be a little off. It's not a big deal. But Animal Well, like, I appreciate that this thing is like mapping, like, have I been here or not? And also, the ability to actually literally mark a spot. And it's just nice. Modern conveniences, they are nice.
It did it all right.
Yeah.
Animal Well was a game it was my favorite game of 2024, bar none, hands down. And I did not start looking at a map to find things until I got kind of in the back half or like higher layers. I wanted to explore and find as much as I could because they did do such a great job with the in-game map. It wasn't necessarily obviously grid-based. If it was, you could fill in things in strange ways. So cool. Let's see where this goes. Let's spin the wheel. And then it reached a point of like, no, wait, did I get all of those candles? Did I find all of those eggs? And mapgenie.io for Animal Well. Yeah, looking at this versus any Metroidvania from the 16-bit era, holy shit.
Yeah. The Metroidvania map specifically, like there have been so many quality of life upgrades. I didn't finish it, but the new Prince of Persia that came out last year, I'm blanking on the subtitle for it now, but I got a fair ways into it. And as I was playing it, I realized when you mark the map, you can then take a screenshot of where you are on the map and it saves it. So when you highlight or go back, you can see the area like in screenshot form, not just on the map. So you can kind of mark it, write what it is. It just gives you all these customization options that we had to draw by hand back in the day. But also, what I love about your book specifically, Brian, is that you're not just talking about RPG maps. You're not just talking about adventure game maps. One of my favorite pages, because it reminds me of the old strategy guides of platformers. It's like the Mega Man X spread where you show the entire grid work of the progression of like Storm Eagle's map and like how it goes up and like where everything paths out. I just love that look. It reminds me of like I had the Super Mario World strategy guide growing up. I unfortunately don't have it anymore. But my favorite parts of it were like the 2-page spreads of like the entire stage of like Donut Plains or whatever else. And you could see all the paths and everything. When we talk about maps in games, we don't always consider of like the actual mapping of the stages, which is, I think, also something that, especially in platformers, has only changed. Like, I've never looked it up. I'm sure it exists, but I can't even imagine what a map work of the platforming in Celeste looks like. That mountain climb, how massive it is. But it must look incredibly impressive. And like when you lay out maps like this, for the Mega Man Robot Masters, it really shows you quite how impressive those layouts are and how they had to think ahead of like, well, if you go up here, then where does that lead? And that kind of layout for the adventure.
Yeah, it also, like what you're saying, reminds me of like when you look at the original Legend of Zelda and the developers had to figure out how to fit everything into memory, and they had to basically like jigsaw puzzle all the dungeons. They had to all kind of fit together.
Yeah.
As we know, like constraints can breed creativity. Maybe they would have went bigger, or maybe they would have had these dungeons that would have been more drawn out and maybe more boring, but like maybe this actually was a good thing. Like who knows? But I just always love like learning about those little things. And then also when you mentioned like the magazine layouts, it just also reminds me of like it's not just the games that are nostalgic now, like just literally magazines are nostalgia now. It's like kind of bittersweet to think of them in that way.
Yeah, no, we had a recent episode talking about those and talking about the way that we preserve this information. Having a physical instruction manual, map, magazine is a great way of preserving these, but isn't perfect. Having them digitally, having them within the game is a great way, but isn't perfect. All of them are worth pursuing, and none of them are worth abandoning.
I can just give you an example. Like I'll pick up some Japanese guides that I've never seen anywhere on the internet other than maybe a blurry cover photo. And the only way you can get a good scan of that thing is you kind of have to cut it up. And it's a sad moment sometimes, but sometimes it's like that's what people do to preserve things. And it's not just for the book. Sometimes it's just about like making sure there's some high quality scans saved for the future, right?
Those things have like another 10 years anyway, so like let's back them up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the glue is dying on those things. They're starting to turn yellow. There is also that. So it's
Yeah.
like I think it's worth killing one book for the sake of putting it digitally for all of humanity. It's not like this. We're not saving lives here, but it's still it's still a
you're
good
not
deed.
burning all of them. But no, I get that. Like anytime you're like cutting up a book, it's like, oh God.
Oh, it does hurt. It's like the sound when the spine breaks. It kind of hurts. It kind of hurts to hear.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. But yeah, like right now, I mean, I have no problem talking about it. Like the NES Maps book is one of the more popular books that we've done. It's one that I did design personally, or, did the layouts for and everything, and other people contributed art and articles and stuff. But I was never fully satisfied with that book. So I'm actually currently completely redoing it. So It's going to be a large format. It's going to be a hardcover. It's going to be glossy, heavier paper. It's just going to be all around more beautiful, but also every single page is being completely redone. I just feel like it just deserves a complete revamp. It's going to be much longer. It's going to have more games in it, way more content, way more art. It's going to have way more articles. There's actually I won't spoil it yet. There's a cool exclusive interview in there with someone tied to NES gaming of the past, some other cool little extra fun stuff in there. So it's like, it's currently running at about 500 plus pages.
Damn.
I'm going to try to avoid the whole 3-volume thing because, that can be annoying for people when they miss one and then they're like, is it really limited? Is it coming back? And I say maybe, not sure. Kind of depends on how we're feeling in the moment. I'm really excited for that because it's just like the NES has just such a rich history. There's a lot to be done there. It deserves to go back. So much content being pulled back into that I'm really excited about.
Nice.
I'm very excited for it as well, especially since I have a digital copy of the original run of it, but obviously the physical version's out of print. Also excited that, maybe other familiar writers you've seen before will reappear in that book. And it's funny because with the NES specifically, there are maps in those games that it's like, I don't even know how to make sense of them. Like one of my favorite NES games that nobody knows about is Mandel Palace, which was one of Game Freak's original games. The layout for that game is just bizarre because the combat is you're sliding tiles to shatter people. It's like this kind of tower that you're climbing and it's sort of an action adventure, sort of not. It's just such a weird game. And so games like that still exist now for sure. And there are tons of weirdo games, but I feel like especially in the 8 and 16-bit era, nobody knew what a video game was. We were figuring that out. Whereas now we're going back and using that nostalgia to create awesome things. And there are still original ideas now, but there's something about that Wild West, that frontier of the Atari 2600 and then the NES and the SNES and the Genesis and the Master System, all of that stuff. And these games that could only exist in that era. And then we chase that kind of nostalgia to recreate those kind of environments. But the limitations bred that kind of creativity. Map design is part of that, right? You look at the first Zelda map versus Zelda 2 versus Link to the Past. All of those maps are drastically different, but with commonality that will continue on in Zelda into even the 3D era. That's kind of a fascinating thing about map design as well throughout gaming history is there are certain tropes that are familiar. I think of if you've played DuckTales and you've played Shovel Knight, you've played the same maps. Because the layout design is similar. And I like those kind of patterns too that you can see repeating. I mentioned Pipistrello before I'm playing it. I'm like, oh, this is both kind of a Zelda map, but also kind of a Metroid map because it doesn't give you the whole map. It gives you a vibe of where stuff is, but you still have to uncover it like it's a Metroidvania. And I think those kinds of combos we're starting to see more now, which is really interesting when it comes to map design.
Well, especially because nowadays there are, more games. And so with that, speaking to our own age of all of us on the call here within enough years of each other, where it's that kind of there's not enough time to play everything, but I want to play everything, versus the fact that, there's just a lot more games now and access to them versus when we were kids. We learned how to play through trial and error and through feel. A game that I played a lot as a kid on the NES was Tom and Jerry. Some of those stages, especially the first stage, has no rhyme or reason. There are some things that you can clearly climb on, and that's consistent. There's hazards everywhere. It is an oddly non-linear stage. And I couldn't tell you where to go right now off the top of my head, but I am fairly certain that if you put the controller in my hand, I'd screw it up a little because it has been a while, but I'd find my way pretty quickly. And that's not even a game like Crystalis or Shadowgate that I've played through so many times and I know intimately and I can just go do this, grab this, do this. It's there again, building an IKEA cabinet versus making your way there. But we had the time, the energy, the whatever. There was a slower push to get the hot new thing because it was magazines and not the internet. And that's not saying the internet is bad. It's just saying it's different. And so how we deal with the maps now, it's different.
Yeah. I mean, something you two are kind of touching on here is I don't know how you two thought about this, but 20 years ago, I actually thought we weren't even going to have Metroidvania games anymore or 2D side scrolling game. I thought those were going to be done. And it actually makes me so happy to see that what is often a new generation of people coming up who are playing NES and SNES games for the first time and then are inspired by them. And they're not looking at them and saying, oh, this is old, this is lame. They're I want to make a game. And now we have Hollow Knight and Shovel Knight and Animal Well and like Metroid Dread even, like, which is not, indie and not young people, I'm sure, but
Still 2D though.
still 2D and still like classic and like has that old feel. And like, it just warms my heart to know that like we're still doing these things. I thought I was going to have to always tap into like the old games to get that feeling. So it's just nice to know that these things are all still happening together, regardless of how they treat maps. It's just something I really enjoy.
So my spouse plays some video games by osmosis on some level sometimes because I'm so into video games, but has loved Control, played a variety of walking sims. But there was something about Claire Obscure Expedition 33 that really drew her in. It's her first turn-based RPG ever. To that end, now when she asks, well, she's still playing it. She beat it like 2 weeks ago and is still playing like post-game stuff and bosses and all of that great stuff, which an obsession on that level is like, yes, welcome. You're one of us now. But like, to that end, it's like, well, now I can recommend literally everything. You've played like the pinnacle of like what's new, but there are so many games like that on so many different levels that now I have the language to explain to you. To that end, about wondering if those games would exist anymore, there was a period in like the N64 PlayStation era where I went, well, everything's 3D now, I guess. When Breath of the Wild became one of the best-selling Legend of Zelda games ever, I was sad because I loved it, don't get me wrong, but to me it didn't feel like a Zelda game because I love the top-down Zelda games. They've always been my favorite. Shout out to Minish Cap, one of the best Zelda games ever made. And when that became popular, I was like, well, the music was sparse. It's a beautiful game, but like, this is not the design I want. And then when they announced the Link's Awakening remake, and then we got Echoes of Wisdom even after that, I went, oh, we are still going to get these. Thank God. Because there are times where like, I'm looking at the design of a game, the style of a game, and I wonder, will we ever see this again? And there are tons of franchises clamoring for that, right? You think about franchises that are quote unquote dead. I mean, just the recent release of the Gex trilogy, right? Those are games that we thought would be trapped on those consoles forever, is now available and is a series that transitioned from 2D to 3D in that era of mostly 3D games. With that, also the map design changed within that era. I think about when it comes to maps, being in Ocarina of Time for the first time, getting to Hyrule Field for the first time and looking at that map, it was awe-inspiring. Now, if someone plays it, they'll be like, that's it? Because of how much bigger that stuff has got. But there was something about that awe of that, or like the first time you get to Bob-omb Battlefield in Mario 64 and you just look at what's there. To me, the best maps can inspire awe regardless of what's in them. It's how they're designed. It's how you're introduced to them. It's how you interact with them.
Yeah, definitely agree.
So, with all that in mind, I also want to bring up the way that I often interact with maps in games. As I mentioned, my partner is a big gamer as well. She will often play games and need somebody on guidebook or to help point out where a few things are. That's what I do. We're playing through Baldur's Gate 3 right now, and every now and again, where exactly is that place again? Open up the map. That's where that is. We played through Final Fantasy X and X-2 for the first time together on the PS4. There's no in-game maps really for that game, not particularly. We had some physical guidebooks, but also still making all of that work was interesting and a lot of interpretation. Does anybody here have favorite implementations of maps, whether through physical aspects or things that maps do? What are the things that we find that a video game map does that really makes it sing?
Well, I mean, I think we touched on, like, for me, like, what's important is, like, don't give me too much, but also...
It's as much information as enticement.
Yeah, like, you can show me what the next room maybe is starting to look like, or, like, I walked in the room, so now you can illuminate it. But I don't want to, like, see everything. I mean, the sense of discovery in a game, regardless if it's the map or the items or unlocking mechanics or whatever, like, that's what's rewarding about games. It's like, well, it's that and beating the hard boss or whatever, right? You want just enough level of difficulty and just enough satisfaction in like completing a task, right? It's tapping into our lizard brains. That goes for maps too. I want to have like a hint, like, oh, maybe there's something over that hill. It looks like I can go over there. Maybe the map's letting me know that because it's not on the edge of the map, right? Because we all know you can't go over the edge of the map.
Of course not.
Little things like that. And so like little breadcrumbs can be helpful also. The thing I hate about playing a game is like, I don't like to slow my pace. It's why I don't really tend to play a lot of stealth games. Like I'll play I played Elden Ring and the expansion. There's a little bit of like, creeping, but it's not like a super stealthy type game. I want to just be able to go berserk and stuff. So if I have to like pause, I typically don't look up stuff very often, but if I'm like, look, I got something to do, So I can't spin my wheels on this thing any longer. I'm going to swallow my pride and look something up. It will happen, right? But pausing and having to look something up, it drives me crazy. So if the game, whether it be the map or whether it be the hints or whether like it just gives me just enough information so I don't feel like I have to do that. That makes me happy. I do wish I had that navigator counterpart. That would be really nice. So if the game can facilitate that process, so I don't need another human being in the room who doesn't want to do that for me, because my wife will definitely not do that for me, then that would be great. I do think it would be like one day, like my son's a little too young for it. He's only played really cheesy arcade games. He doesn't even know what home video games even are. He doesn't even know, like, I used to do things. He doesn't know what all the things are on my shelf.
Ooh.
But one day, like, I would love him to be my counterpart, or even better, I would like to be his counterpart. I want to be the one who says, like, oh yeah, you can jump on that thing. Like, have you tried that? Like, that's going to be a really fun moment.
Yeah, I think to answer that question, I have a couple of answers. One is like, as far as maps that I love or like things in maps, talking about the sense of discovery. And when I was an early gamer in the early PC era, nothing was better than the sense of discovery in a multiplayer StarCraft map you've not played before, and you are trying to find the enemy, right?
Yeah.
The fog of war starts to lift. It moves as you move. And then suddenly there's the Protoss, because I was always the Zerg. And then we get to rush them with all the Zerglings and kill everybody. That kind of rush, I think, is something that's hard to recreate now. We're just in a different era of strategy games, and especially those kinds of tactical games and real-time strategy games. There was something so satisfying of playing the old Red Alert games and just getting to discover a map in real time as you move through it. And like StarCraft 2 has it, and some of the more modern games do still have it. But there was that rush that I got in the early days that I just don't feel like I get now. As far as unique stuff on maps, I mean, I think the more we can mark and interact with maps, the happier I am, right? I don't know about y'all, but my memory doesn't get better. It only gets worse. And so anytime I can put an icon and have a variety of icons, like the best thing about Tears of the Kingdom was all the different symbols I could mark. Okay, I'll use this for chests on the map. I'll use this for like a dungeon I found. And speaking to Elden Ring, since you brought it up, Ryan, like Elden Ring was the first Souls game I really got into. I had beaten Dark Souls 3 with the help of a few mods on PC. And I use the word help very loosely. They made me not die in one hit, instead die in 2 hits, and therefore I could execute some level of strategy in Dark Souls 3. But Elden Ring, I played from start to finish with a lot of help from friends. But the thing that I think saved me in that game, because I got lost so much and because I always felt overwhelmed, was the smart maps that like IGN and a few other sites had, where you could just look at the map raw and see just the landscape and with a couple of pointers, but not have anything. Or you could look at a map with a million icons on it and they can tell you where everything is. Well, I didn't always use it. If I was like really stuck or didn't know where to go or just needed just one more spawn point so I would respawn closer to where the boss was, I used that map and it was super helpful. It's funny, I think maps have never been better or worse at the same time, right? Like they are so detailed and have so much information that it can be great to help you navigate games. But I think also so many maps become so cluttered and so overburdened. I am curious what a map in GTA 6 looks like, right? I remember GTA 3. I remember like those early games. And though I haven't played 4 or 5 very much, I have seen the maps in those games. I have seen some gameplay, and it's like, are they going to go extra hard with the detail so you can see every little thing? Or are they going to make it broader so you can kind of discover for yourself? Like, I'm really curious because it's been a decade since the last game in that franchise. And there have been not just so many maps in games, but so many maps just in open world games that are so different from each other. I'm so curious how Grand Theft Auto as a franchise handles a map in 2026 now, because it got pushed back. It could be the most innovative map we've ever seen.
It might just literally be Google Maps.
Right?
For all we know.
Oh,
which
God.
would be, but imagine how crazy that is if you're playing that on PC and you can actually type in a location in this fictional world and it gives you directions, right? It does feel reductive, but it also kind of feels amazing at the same time. It depends on your perspective. Like, I'm more excited about where that game innovates than actually playing the game itself. I have my own complicated history with the Grand Theft Auto franchise and with Rockstar as a development studio, but for sure, I am curious where innovation will show up, because like the biggest complaint I saw a lot about Metroid Dread, although I loved it, was most people were like, well, yeah, but it's Metroid, and we've gotten better Metroidvanias that do better things. I think better is relative. Metroid Dread, the reason I loved it, it was a follow-up to one of my favorite Metroid games and continued the 2D tradition of having a detailed map, having this unique layout. It didn't use any of the innovations that games like Hollow Knight and others created. It stuck to what Metroid does well. So I am interested as we move forward with maps and games, what those innovations look like, and will the AAA space pioneer that, or more likely the indie space pioneer that? Because again, Animal Well, for a game that I had zero interest in till the date came out, and then the minute I picked it up on PlayStation Plus, I couldn't put it down for 3 days straight. Like, I'm really curious about what games like that will do for maps in modern gaming, because they seem to have bigger ideas than some of the AAA gaming space, the Ubisoft of it all.
Yeah, I mean, the indie games influence the big boys, and then the big boys influence the indie games, and they keep going back and forth. You mentioned those map markers. I mean, yeah, they're definitely a great quality of life thing. It's interesting, though. I always think of it as like there's like excitement in gaming, and then there's like, at least for me, anxiety in gaming. And like, obviously, I
Yes.
want the former, I don't want the latter. And I get the anxiety when I'm juggling too many things that I still want to do in my head. So if I can write them down on a notepad, or if I can mark them on a map, they're not anxiety anymore. They're future things to do. Because like
Right,
right.
I hate the idea of like missing out on something special in the game. It's not about being necessarily a completionist, even though I sometimes am, but it's more about like, oh, there's something special in this game and I want to be part of the zeitgeist. I want to like experience that too, right? Like
Right.
it's something cool. And like I'm not gonna remember. And I want that balance. I also don't want the former where it's just like everything is check the box, do the next thing, check the box, do the next thing. Like that doesn't mean I don't like linear games. Actually, some of my most favorite games are pretty linear, but it means like there's still a little bit of choice. When I think about like Grand Theft Auto, I have a feeling we have similar vibes on it, because like for me, like GTA 3 was like the pinnacle. Yeah, it didn't look the best, but like
Yeah.
Who
I
cares?
don't
It looked
care
amazing at the
about
time.
that. Yeah, and obviously the jump from 1 and 2 to 3 was incredibly massive, and then you get diminishing returns. You get graphical quality enhancements, better voice acting, perhaps. You get more realism. But like at the end of the day, like I stopped playing 5 because I was just like, I don't have that sense of like, what are those things I need to do? It's just, you can do everything, but everything is too much. And everything in 3 was more like the sandbox, everything. It was more like have fun and everything. But it was like, find those 100 packages or whatever it was. Like, that's obtainable. I can do that. It just became too much for me. Going back to the map concept, a little bit of like opening up the fog of war, maybe some map markers, but don't make me feel like I gotta mark everything. Otherwise, it becomes a chore. Most games don't do that. I feel like Breath of the Wild did it perfectly well. I think it's like, yeah, just mark 5 things at a time that you might go back to. You'll be fine.
I feel Ubisoft gets that reputation, whether fairly or unfairly. A lot of Assassin's Creed games feel a bit like, check the box, here's so many things. Isn't that good? We filled it with things.
Maps can cause anxiety. I mean, we talked about this. We did a whole episode about the open world and the anxiety that can lay out before you, how I can't really go back to Skyrim anymore because all I can think about is the end game at the start of that game now, because I've played it so many times and it makes me not want to play it. But like Ubisoft also, like, I hadn't played an Assassin's Creed game since 3, and then I bought Origins because I heard that the story was incredible. But once I got out of the tutorial, I opened the map and had like 18 icons already on the map and went, oh no, I can't do this. The reason I like Shadows as an Assassin's Creed game is there is stuff on the map, but you only see the icons as you do the climbing points to open up the map. You can see a lot of the map like you can look at a cloth map, but the details don't fill in till you do that. And so you can ignore a lot of the side quest stuff if you just want to go from story mission to story mission. But because they added an XP system, you do need to do extra stuff. And so it felt more manageable because they compartmentalized it. That's my biggest conflict with modern mapping in games, is if you see everything. To the credit of Elden Ring, you only saw stuff as you explored it. And in the original map, before they patched it, you really could only see the spawn points, the sites of grace. You couldn't see anything else. They eventually added that later because I think it's very easy to look at a map from a Ubisoft game and just become completely overwhelmed by the scope of all the things they want you to do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and this might sound a little hokey, but I think this is very cheesy. I think the map in Elden Ring are the players who have played more, and just you follow them and they show you where to go.
Yeah.
Because that was a lot of my experience in Elden Ring, which is so weird and joyful at the same time. Because the map has some detail, but like, let's be honest, like this game is built to be confusing on purpose.
Yeah.
So it's like you can draw a straight line from whatever you to this castle or whatever. But the entry point is actually, you got to go behind the castle, another mile beyond that, and then under a cave, and then through an underground river, and then up a ladder. And that's part of the joy of actually experiencing that game.
But that is also bringing things full circle, full ring, I suppose, where a lot of perplexing and obtuse arcade games of the 80s and into the early 90s were made so, A, because they were quarter munchers, and B, with the idea that players would talk to each other about it. You would have your schoolyard rumors. The NES era of games, nowadays we play it without the instruction manual, and we're like, how are people supposed to know it? Well, you needed the instruction manual, but also people would fling themselves at it, and we'd all talk it out. We'd all figure it out. I don't remember where I first figured out up, left, down, left to get through the Lost Woods and Legend of Zelda, but now I know. And it was something that I'm certain somebody told me. With the idea of mini-maps and everything else, and so many arcade experiences have come home to roost 4 generations ago. Where does that come anymore, especially in the more trolling ideas of an online gaming world, whether, again, true or not? These are the stereotypes. Something like Elden Ring, like a lot of FromSoft games, where sometimes it's a note that says jump off the cliff, it'll be funny. And sometimes it's, no, you need to go behind the castle. The arcade is everywhere. We are all drawing the map for each other. And that is one of my favorite ways. I've got others and I'll share them, but that is one of my favorite ways of drawing the map and presenting it.
Well, yeah, so it's interesting. This might be the most compelling pitch for me to actually play Death Stranding, a game that I have no interest in. I'm a Kojima hater. Having not played any of his work, I am.
And I'm the opposite, so this is fine.
Right. Geoff is a super fan. But the thing that does interest me about Death Stranding that I've heard, though I haven't played, but I've watched some playthroughs, is that the pathing for that game, the roads, the ladders, all of that is user designed. People in the game leave things for other things. So as far as map design goes, it goes beyond just marking the map. You are literally creating the map for other players. And that, I think, is fascinating. Do I want to deliver a bunch of packages? Do I want to crush monsters? Although I think they patched out that they're monsters now. They're like some undescribed power energy drink. That argument of I could come to Death Stranding now with the sequel on the horizon as of when we're recording and experience what all of these players have laid before me. That sounds like a reason to play the game, not the Kojima of it all, the ridiculous story, the motion cap, all of that, which I'm sure is of a quality and it would be entertaining. That feels more compelling to me about something like Death Stranding. And there's so many other games that are allowing you to create that space together. And I think that's the nail you're hitting on the head, Geoff, that the future of map making is communal map making for these kinds of games, whether it's Elden Ring just kind of figuring it out or literally creating the map in Death Stranding.
Death Stranding, one of my favorite games I've ever played. It blew me away. I waited for the director's cut. I didn't even play it until early this year. I slept on it. I thought it was going to be a delivery simulator, and I was very, very wrong. And I won't spoil anything for you, but when you talk about the map and the connectivity, it is actually pretty deep, the way the themes are about connections and loss of connections and what it means to be close and far from people and the way the world is shifting for better or for worse and what that means for us in humanity today in the real world. It is quite beautiful. Yes, it's very over the top, but it's kind of like you embrace that and then you can enjoy it. I couldn't be more excited for the sequel. I'm so pumped. That point, you made, Geoff, about how we would share knowledge with our friends, maybe read a snippet here, or kind of progress a little farther. The closest modern experience I had to that was there's a modern NES game, it came out like a year or so ago, called Full Quiet. Mm-hmm. And it had just come out. It's like you're side scrolling, but if you think of it on a map, it's like you're going left, right, up and down. You can kind of go up these up and down pathways, kind of I think Friday the 13th, if I'm remembering correctly from NES. It's very mysterious. There's a lot of points you're like, okay, what is this puzzle? What do I actually need to do here? Do I do it now? Or is it the Metroidvania gating thing where I come back here later? I'm not really sure. And I did draw a map on grid paper. I actually felt like I had to. I had no choice. The point I want to make about, your tie back to the days of old is I tried to Google something and the answer literally didn't exist because no one had posted it yet. I later found there was a Discord where some people were talking and then I got one question answered. And then I went in there and answered some other questions for other people. I'm like, this is the digital version of what we used to do. It's kind of nice because you really can't do that unless a game is small and very indie and niche. It doesn't matter if it's day one. You go to some GameFAQ type site and it's 24 hours in, the whole game is mapped out and everything's answered. It's just kind of sad, but I guess helpful for busy folks.
But half the time the game is mapped out through video, which bugs the hell out of me.
Yeah. I like written FAQs, and something that drives me crazy, to get off my gilded golden horse for a second, being someone who reviews games and getting them before launch, the worst thing to happen is like I get to a dungeon and I get stuck and then go, all right, well, I'll just Google this. Shoot. And like you can't find the solution. Like in that case, though, like devs are often very responsive, PR reps too, especially if it's an indie game. Like you can write them like, hey, I'm really stuck. Do you guys have anything for me? Or they'll give like frequently asked questions in a press packet or whatever. But I do miss some of that group discovery. Another thing that I got caught up with, as we mentioned, Animal Well for like the 8th time, is like that first week, it was the Wild West and it was great. Like people really didn't know what to do, didn't know where to go. I found out after I beat the game that I was using the bubble wand in like one of the most difficult ways possible. There was a way to upgrade it, like all of that stuff. I love that. I love when games do that. And some of the best games to come out in the last 10 years, specifically indie games, have done that kind of communal like, oh, wait. And while you gave a pretty compelling pitch, Brian, for Death Stranding, so that may end up on the docket, not this year, but at some point soon, that kind of camaraderie is why we play games, and it's why FOMO happens and all of that. It's like you want to be a part of the rush to discuss, figure out, and solve this game. I've not played Blueprints yet, but everything I've seen and read about it, it's like that is one of those games where it's like, everyone's just trying to figure it out and communally discussing like what they found. And I love that part of it. And I think engaging with maps and what maps do for games is a big part of that communal sourcing how to get through the thing.
Yeah, well, and I think Blueprints actually exists a little bit in the same lineage or corner of obfuscation that Animal Well does. Something I really enjoyed about the early days of Animal Well being out was most folks that had figured out certain solutions or were further along were very good about being coy about giving solutions. Not necessarily going, oh, you need this, do this, do this. It's sort of a, if you've reached that room, you have everything you need. Something along those lines. Blueprints is another game where some of it's randomized. So you can't actually go, well, this leads to this and da-da-da-da. But some rooms will have things and combinations and certain solutions are consistent. But even then, there's a bit of a find this, find this. But I bring this up as the two of them being related, since there are these smaller games that draw fervent audiences, because there's Discords and subreddits, because there is online discussion that can happen one way or another, we can have those notes on the wall. We can have those conversations amongst fanatics, whether it's the cafeteria or a messaging app, that allows a game to be mysterious. Because there is also a drive for a game to be accessible as quickly as possible, especially smaller games, because if somebody, butts up against something and goes, well, I can't do this, the frustration tolerance is probably low. If you're playing a Zelda game and it's a little frustrating, but you've played Zelda games before, you're going to keep going because you love Zelda. And the problem is probably you. It can't be Zelda. Zelda's great. But if it's a new game, the problem's the game sucks, and everyone who makes it sucks, and I'm going to run away. The need to draw them in as quickly as possible is palpable. But certain presentations, certain ideas, things where failure is allowed and encouraged, where exploration is allowed and encouraged, where danger is present but not cruel, allows for that roguelike feeling. What if I tried again? What's over here? Does anyone else know? And you can ask, and you can look for it. You can ask yourself, you can come back to it later, and you might have had the solution because you were thinking about it for the entire weekend, speaking from personal experience, or you just are reaching out. And so there's this interesting turn that's happening, or that I'm noticing. It's probably been happening for a long time, and I'm late to the party, which is great because it's still going on. This kind of communal mapping that's happening.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than you maybe go to a website, you just want to look up, you just want to know, like, oh, is this going to trigger the end of the game? Or like, did I miss anything else? I just want to kind of look, and then it's like, okay, so this is the part where the main character dies, and it like starts telling you all these horrible spoilers. Like, there's nothing where, and like you're trying to glaze your eyes, so you only see the one word you're trying to like. That's why, like, to your point, like, I just like to go to like my handful of friends. We use like a Slack channel most of all, and sometimes some Discord as well. But like, to just be like, look, I'm semi stuck, or I want to make sure this is not the end. I don't even have to say, don't spoil anything. You know me, like, and they'll give me like this really subtle hint, and it like, that's like everything you need in that moment,
I find myself as somebody that has played Persona 4 Golden a lot. surrounded by people that are playing Persona 4 Golden for the first time. Matt is one of them, and several podcasts I have guested on recently have all had people that are like, oh, we've got an episode about it coming up, so I'm trying to finish it up. And the way that I have found to ask where they are is what day are you on? What month are you in? Because certain storyline things happen in that like linear fashion. Certain storyline things have to happen within certain periods of time. So I don't have to ask who's in your party. Did this thing happen? Did that person die? Did this person ascend to godhood and turn everything into pudding? That's what Teddy does. I'm sorry, Matt. I'm sorry to spoil that for you. Teddy turns everything into pudding.
How dare you?
Teddy does what Teddy wants. Anyway, yeah, it's finding those like map points, those checkpoints. We don't want the whole picture. I just need to know, am I on the right track? What's the next step? Some of my favorite games are ones where I get to literally fill in the map, either because I'm walking around and filling it in grid by grid. I've put more time into Diablo 2 than probably is necessary because I was just filling in the map. I wanted to fill in all the walls. I am a huge fan of the Persona Q games, and I'm going to be playing Etrian Odyssey so that I can just draw my maps as I play them. Grid paper is so good to me in D&D games. Just getting to draw that out and make sense of it. It just feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, the mapping and engaging with games in this way, like I'm someone who is burdened by not wanting spoilers, but even still, I've been spoiled on games that I love and then go back and still, like Undertale, famously, I saw everything about that game before I ever touched it. And still, the first time I played it and the first choice I made where I killed someone and then Flowey called me out on it when I rebooted the game after I started from scratch is still effective. Well-designed game with an interesting map and an interesting layout breeds communal discussion. It's like you were talking about, Brian, with Expedition 33. Getting lost in that game was frustrating, but also when I did, I would then jump into Discord where I knew friends were playing it and go, hey, I'm stuck here. I went left when I should have gone right. Does anyone else know how do I get to this thing? And then 3 people who were also playing it would go, oh, I was there. I got stuck in the same place. Because that's my favorite thing about a well-designed map or environment layout is if you got stuck, odds are at least 3 other people did. Either by the intent of the artist, like wanting it to be a little confusing, so you have to find your way, or because maybe there was a poor decision for the layout or whatever. But either way, if you got stuck, someone else did. And I think that also within purposeful layouts adds to the communal work together for discovering those kinds of games.
I do like Google searching when I run into certain problems and trying to do it in the vaguest way possible and feeling so validated when the first 5 hits are people complaining about it. It's like, at least I'm not alone. And isn't that what this is all about?
Brian, this was a wonderful chat. Thank you for joining us. Before we wrap up the show and thank some patrons, I would love for you to tell folks where they can find you online, find retro game books, and the best ways to purchase the cool stuff that you've made.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks again. So retrogamebooks.com, you can check out our store, everything that's on there. We got hardcovers, soft covers, there's even a coloring book. We got a few t-shirts, notebooks, stickers, all that kind of fun stuff. It's a big hit of nostalgia. As I mentioned earlier, we have a few books in the pipeline. We have one by Nadia Oxford, many musings of her upbringing, how games influenced her life. It's really, really interesting. Each chapter kind of touches on a different game. Another book that's to be announced, and keeping that one secret, it's always good to keep a few things secret. The NES map book is getting revamped. There's the SNES Volume 3, which is going to be the final volume, will be coming out hopefully by end of this year or late next year. So lots of things going on. As far as social goes, most active on Bluesky. It's also at Retro Game Books. You can kind of find me on a few other things, but I definitely don't go to the Twitter ones. If you want to go to the website, you can always email us, reach out to us, or join our mailing list if you want to be the first to know about things, get discounts, that kind of stuff. We also have ebook versions of things. I know international shipping can be expensive, but there's no international shipping on ebooks. I know they're not the same. I'm a physical first guy too, as I am with games as well, so I understand. And the last thing is we do have a pitch form. So if you are a journalist or a writer, you want to pitch a book, a project for us, fill that out. Maybe we can strike a deal. Right now, we're not looking to sign anything for this year, maybe late this year, early next year, just because we want to wrap up some projects, but you can still submit things. I'm always actively reviewing those things. But yeah, like really reach out to me on Bluesky or whatever. Like I love talking about games because that's what we do.
Shout out to Nadia Oxford, friend of the show, one of the hosts over at Blood God. I love Nadia's work, and so I'm so excited for her book. I'm so glad that she's writing a book. I know you've also worked with Aiden Moeller, who's a previous guest of this show, Fight Magic Items, which is on your website and is a great book. And he's working on a new book now. I think several new books, maybe. Just some cool people that you've collaborated with. Also, funny story before we wrap up. I didn't know my friend Andre from Fine Time was in volume 1 of the SNES book until he posted about it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in the book too. I'm in volume 2. Thanks again, Brian, for joining us. I love the work that you're doing. I love these kind of compendiums of important video game history, and honored to be a part of it and excited for the future of what you guys put out because it's all really cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, I encourage anyone out there that wants to check it out. The ebooks are very affordable. You know, apartment living, you can only have so many nice books, but having the resources is kind of really nice. The art's beautiful, and it's nice to reminisce about games you loved and to learn about games that you did not know existed. It's a lot of fun, so check that out. But we put it to you. What games do you remember the maps of with your eyes closed and the controller in your hand? What are maps that you've never been able to figure out? What are your favorite ways of mapping out a game? Do you still have your old graph paper maps of things and puzzle solutions written down? I would love to see them. I wish I could find some of my old ones. I think I've got a couple of them, but they're probably at my mom's house. This may be one of those times where she didn't throw my stuff away. Who knows? Who's to say? But if you've still got yours, let us know. Reach out. There's so many great ways to get in touch with us. We are Fun and Games Pod across all social media that we are active upon, which, as of this episode, is Bluesky, Instagram, and Tumblr. You can email us at funandgamespod@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought of this episode, what you thought of previous episodes, what you'd like us to talk about, and who you'd like us to talk with on future episodes. You can visit certainpov.com and find links to other fantastic Certain POV podcasts and a permanent invite link to our Discord server where a lot of these conversations continue. We post about games we've beaten, screenshots of games we love. Topics that we talk about often start there and continue into all of this, so we'd love for you to be there. And we'd also want to thank all of our patrons on Patreon. If you want a one-stop shop of all the things Matt and I are working on, that's the place to check it out. Patreon.com/funandgamespod. There is a free tier, so you do not have to give any money to get updates on everything we put out. But thank you to everybody who has been able to support us, especially those on the high scoreboard. And today the high scoreboard is Alex Lavelle, Case Aiken, Daniel Nyden, Alejandro Alves, Chris Copeline, Curly Bright, Film It Yourself, Patrick Edwards, Robert Prine, and Sean Bowen. Thank you so much for your support. Don't let the Foot Clan destroy the dam. You have my support.
Of course, a free way that you can support us besides joining at the free tier on the Patreon, if you don't have the bucks, is by rating and reviewing the podcast. We are on all podcast platforms. Seriously, I've hunted them all down. If you are listening on a platform that we weren't on and you found us through RSS feed shenanigans, please let me know. Most of those platforms have a 5-star rating or some kind of short review or both. It only takes a few minutes. Usually you only have to listen to like the first 30 to 60 seconds to do it. We really appreciate it. I have spent afternoons literally going down the list on Spotify of my friends' shows, just rating them so we can get that hit to the algorithm. It really helps us, so when folks search for maps and video games, this episode gets pushed to the top and we can defeat the almighty algorithm together.
Whether you're a patron on Patreon, whether you are rating and reviewing, whether you have the most intense collection of video game maps that I would love to see, or that this is your first episode of Fun and Games Podcast, thank you so much for being here. We couldn't do this without you. This is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I am Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.
Hello, my name is Aaron. I'm one half of Superpod Saga, a topical variety video game podcast fueled entirely by nostalgia and unleaded gasoline. Superpod Saga, we discuss a different video game topic each and every week. We have new episodes every single Monday covering a different video game topic. More than anything, we want to entertain our listeners and make you feel like you're one of the boys, like you're hanging out at a campfire with some of your best zany, caffeine-powered buddies and just talking about your favorite games and all that stuff. Stop on down to Superpod Saga. It's on every podcatcher there is. If it's not, let me know and we'll get on it. But again, Superpod Saga, stop on by.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.